educational programs about nature issues. We had Jim Bissell from the Museum of Natural History come out and talk about some of the special things that are in our parks a couple of months ago. We had Tim Barber come in from Environ and Burton and talk about the economic impact of the parks on Geauga County and what a positive they are. And we're lucky to have Harvey Webster come from the museum to talk about Romancing the Eagle. I say we're lucky to have him come because nice write-up in Plain Dealer this morning about your rehab program and that sort of thing. We're also lucky because I've known Harvey, well, when I first met you, Harvey, we both had hair.
Back in the Ice Age.
Well, we're lucky to have Harvey because when he went on his honeymoon, which was a camping trip across the West, his new bride thought she was going to be a new widow when he tried to touch a buffalo or a elk or...
No. It's a little overblown.
That's not the way she tells it. So, but for those of you who are new to the Protect Geauga Parks group, and there are a lot of you here with our Preserve, Conserve, Protect t-shirts, and we'd like to see those popping out along with yard signs like daffodils this spring. But we came together last August when the board of the parks changed the bylaws and did away with the compatibility issue in the bylaws that said that park activities had to be compatible with one another and had to be compatible with the preservation of the park system. They also did away with the strong leadership position of the executive director, and they haven't been terribly transparent about their activities over the past 8 or 9 months. What we're asking for is that those bylaws be revised, that we get a strong director who is committed to conservation, and that activities need to be compatible. And the original draft of their bylaws had a list of about 20 or 30 items on it, included recreational logging, in case you want to go out and cut down a tree for fun, that sort of thing. It also included things like trapping and recreational hunting, and we were assured that those were just words. They didn't really mean anything. They needed to be there for zoning reasons. And what we have seen now is at the last board meeting, the issue of recreational trapping was brought up. Some of you probably saw the editorial about that. And now we find that there's a letter to the Wild Turkey Association, which says, the Wild Turkey people writing to their membership says, on behalf of the Geauga Park District, we are writing this letter to you because of an initiative by the park to allow more hunting in the parks. So I assume that the folks at the Coon Hunters Association, Pheasant Hunters Association, and the Duck Hunters Association, and the Fox Hunters Association, and the Grouse Hunters Association got similar letters. And they were encouraged to get the survey and fill it out to support this new initiative by the park, which has never been announced publicly. Now, I'm asking you, there should be the survey form out there. If not, it's on the computer. Fill it out and get it in by the 30th. And when you look at that survey, there's a technical term for it. It's called a piece of crap. Any of that, it'll ask you about recreation. You go to the comments section and define what recreation is. If you think recreation is hunting, fine, fill it out. If you think recreation is hiking and picnicking and doing things in the park that are compatible with each other and not disruptive to each other, and don't destroy the basis of the park, then fill it out that way. One of the ones that really amused me was, there's a question, which parks do you use? Top 3. And then right after, do you go to other parks to do other things? And if you put down that you go to other parks to play baseball, but you go to Chickamauga, do you think they're going to interpret that to mean, oh, we don't need to put a baseball field in at Chickamauga? Or do you think they're going to interpret it that, oh, we need to put in a baseball field there, in spite of the fact that 500 yards up the road in Parkland, there's a baseball field. They're going to interpret this however they want to. And it's up to you to fill out the form and be sure it's interpreted the way you want it interpreted. There are lots of technical problems with this survey, including how it's taken, but fill it out, make your feelings known. Our vision for the park is that anybody at any time can come home from work and wake up in the morning and go out to the park and do something fun. Our vision is not that you get up in the morning and say, I'd like to go for a hike at Big Creek, and then check with the park to see if grouse hunting is going on, or pheasant hunting is going on, or if there's a dog sled race going on in Chardon, but you can't use that park because the dog sled race has been moved from Henderson. We are not about excluding people from the park. What we are about is excluding activities from the park. We saw the material on beaver and the beaver trapping. There are some problems with the survey. Folks have found that they can take it multiple times instead of what the park has said, that they could only take it once on the computer. Paper copies, there should be some out front if you need one, but they're not being controlled. We don't know how many paper copies people are taking. When Mr. McHugh was asked about paper copies, he said, well, if a person fills out more than one, we're going to have a handwriting expert check it out and see. My wife called Triad, who's running the survey, and said, so who's your handwriting expert? They were somewhat surprised to discover they were supposed to have one. When you think about the parks, there's a globe out in the lobby out there. You ought to look at the globe. You look at the globe and you look at the painting on the surface of the globe. That paint represents the land, the use that we make use of. That is all we can use, just the surface paint. We don't go 2 miles deep and live. We live in that paint. And then look at the varnish over the top of the paint. That varnish represents the atmosphere that surrounds this earth. It is proportional to the atmosphere that actually surrounds the earth. A thin layer of varnish. We have Geauga County. We have 10,000 acres. We have to protect our layer of paint and our layer of varnish. And we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our neighbors. Geauga County is the beginning of the Chagrin River, the beginning of the Cuyahoga River, the beginning of the Grand River, and a feeder to the Tuscarawas River. We owe our neighbors keeping that water and that air clean for ourselves, our neighbors, and our grandchildren. Now the park will tell you that they only want to put they only have 3% developed, and they only want to develop another 3%. Ask yourself, what do they mean by develop? Develop, they mean under roof or under asphalt. They don't mean the trails. They don't mean the playgrounds. They don't mean the mowed areas. They don't mean the mowed area where butterflies used to land, and now there's an unused baseball field. Only what is under roof or under asphalt is what they're counting. And you'll hear, oh, there's 10,000 acres, there should be room for everything. There's not 10,000 acres. There are 19 postage stamps scattered around the county. And each one of them needs to be protected. Let me tell you, there are little cards back on the back table. Save the date, Saturday, April 18, 2 to 4 p.m., Kent State University, Burton campus. Protect Geauga Parks will have a business meeting. Try to have an education meeting. We've had a square dance in the in the blizzard? Anybody here that was at the square dance? Raise your hand. Oh, good. You got home alive. I was a little concerned. That's going to be an organization meeting. It's going to be a business meeting. We want your input into what we should be doing. We want to tell you where we're going and what we've done to date. So I would ask all of you to save that date, Saturday, April 18, 2 to 4 p.m., Penn State Burton campus. You're more than welcome to say something.
I just want to say, without further ado, let's get.
All right. Thank you. Harvey Webster. Harvey and I go back to some 30 years. And if you haven't been to the Museum of Natural History, you've got to go. If you're interested at all in anything in the natural world, from the molten core of the Earth to the stars a million light years away, and everything in between is represented there. And Harvey is Director of Wildlife Resources there. He got that nice write-up in the Plain Dealer. I also would be remiss if I didn't note that when my daughter was 12 years old, Harvey took her under his wing in the Future Scientist program and had her out pulling weeds and banding birds and doing various things every week for years and years and years. I take credit for the fact that she is now a professor of wildlife pathology at Cornell. I give him credit for talking her into going to Cornell because it's his alma mater and it cost me my life savings.
You're welcome.
Harvey has put together the Perkins Wildlife section over the years there at the museum, and it is a phenomenal place, and it is about to be uprooted and moved. But if you can get there right away, you ought to, because he's gone from bare enclosures to real habitats where bobcat jump from limb to limb, where otters swim in the water through a plexiglass see-through pool. Sandhill cranes are the newest ad.
They were scolding me as I left the museum.
So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to you, Harvey. And thank you very much for making time in your schedule, because I know you're heading up the attempt to raise money for all these projects.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to do this without this. Can I do that? Can you hear me? Cool, okay, let's do that. Okay, it is a great pleasure to be with you today. You know, it's interesting, Ed was talking about the Museum of Natural History and all the cool things that we have there. We're exploring a whole concept. As a matter of fact, it's fundamental to what we're trying to do in renovating our museum. A little modest $150 million renovation. But what we want the museum to be is very relevant to what we're here about today, what we're talking about, and that is we want the Museum of Natural History to be a trailhead. We want folks to come to the Museum of Natural History, learn about all of the fabulous things about this planet we live on, unique, as far as we know, the only place where life is found in the universe, dynamic in the fact that life has shaped the planet. If you inhale, go ahead and 20% oxygen will thank all those cyanobacteria and all of those blue-green algae and all those other plants over eons that have contributed the 20% oxygen to the atmosphere because it didn't get there by itself. Actually, life has transformed this planet, and it's given us an exquisite diversity of life that we see here today, and of course, our parks, our natural areas, our preserves are what capture the best of our natural heritage. So we really believe very strongly in that word conservation. The idea that, you know, yes, we want to move forward, we want to have a healthy standard of living, but we also want to make sure that all of the other things that make up our natural heritage are not left behind. And that's sort of the story, the essence of the story about the bald eagle. Because the bald eagle is talk about an icon, it is the national bird. Whenever you see the President of the United States, there's the Great Seal of the United States of America, and there's the bald eagle on it. 1782, the Congressional Congress voted on adopting the bald eagle as our national symbol. And yet, you'd think that we would celebrate a bird like that? It didn't actually get any kind of protection at all from any governmental agency until 1940. Got its own act of Congress. And up to that point, it had been open season on bald eagles. Bald eagle numbers had kind of lingered on, but in the modern era post-World War II, there was a whole bunch of other assaults that came to them. This is a story about the bald eagle in Ohio, and the things that pushed it towards the edge of extirpation, regional extinction, and the effort that went into bringing it back. And nowadays, I'm happy to say, you go through your Geauga parks, you go up by Bass Lake, and man, you see bald eagles. There's bald eagles over by Snow Lake. There's bald eagles at Ladue. There's bald eagles all over the place. But back in 1979, there were only 4 active nests in the entire state. Okay, so what are we talking about? We are talking about this guy. So this is the national bird. Striking in appearance, orange-yellow bill, straw-yellow eye, white head, white tail, deep brown body. It is as striking as you can imagine a bird to be. And it is uniquely American. It has a distribution from Florida to Alaska. You don't find it in Siberia. You don't find it in Africa or Asia. There are other sea eagles. But this bird, this species, Hyliaeus leucocephalus, occurs only in North America. It truly is ours. And it belongs to this group we call it. You guys see? Do you want to get it over here someplace where you can see more? Okay, good. We call them sea eagles. So if you compare this to a golden eagle, you would notice that they've got a much taller beak, an incredibly robust beak, really powerful, like all the birds of prey, powerful feet, and they are wonderfully designed for capturing fish. And they can do so elegantly. They could be up on a tree overlooking Ladue Reservoir, see a bass come to the surface of the water, just leave some ripples. They glide down, coming low to the surface of the water, and pass over that spot, reach down, and just pull that thing clean and jerk it right out of the water, carry it off to their nest and feed it to the young. They also eat lots of other things. This is hard for you to see, but this is a picture from a nest cam. And in this nest, there happens to be a big muskrat right there. So they'll eat mammals. It's not just fish. And if you notice what this guy's eating, it's eating a Canada goose. One of the few natural enemies of Canada geese, or at least avian or bird enemies, are bald eagles. And if you ever go to Ladue or Pymatuning or Mosquito Creek Reservoir or the big reservoirs in winter, if there's any open water, oftentimes there's hundreds, if not thousands of geese that are gathered there. And oftentimes on the ice, you'll see stationed about 30, 40 yards apart, bald eagles. And they're just watching, looking for sign of weakness. Because the national bird is very opportunistic. Okay? And they build these colossal nests, giant nests that sometimes, well, I'll tell you about a nest that was truly great. And you can see that when they're young in the nest, they're all dark, that sort of chocolate brown down. In their first year, oftentimes they're all dark. They'll have white in the base of the tail and white in the wing linings, and it takes them 5 years to get the white head and the white tail that's typical. And as I said, it's the national bird. It was the Great Seal of the United States of America. 20th of June, 1782 is when the bird was adopted. Supposedly, at the time, Benjamin Franklin objected because he said the bald eagle is a bird of bad moral character. Now, wait a minute, who's passing judgment on bald eagles? Well, it turns out that bald eagles are very clever, and I said they're opportunistic. So let's say an osprey or fish hawk has just grabbed a fish. And ospreys, and we have ospreys that nest in Geauga County, they pick up that fish, and the first thing they do is they shuffle their feathers and get rid of the water, and then they take the fish and they turn it so the head faces in the same direction as the head of the osprey, so it's aerodynamic and doesn't drag mud. So they fly elegantly off with their fish, only coming over their shoulders is a bald eagle diving down on them. The osprey says, oh my gosh, it drops the fish, turns around to face the eagle with its talons. The eagle goes right past it, grabs the fish, and flies off. And You know, that to Ben Franklin was an act of piracy. Okay, so fortunately he was overruled though, because his choice would have been the wild turkey. You know, I don't know that the wild turkey would have looked, don't get me wrong, it's a noble bird, but I'm not sure it's quite as cool as this is. Now, you know, they're storied in terms of, when you take a look at the great works of John James Audubon, and you see these amazing paintings that he and Alexander Wilson and the pioneering naturalists of the late 1700s and early 1800s, and they capture our imagination. And they usually have bloody scenes where the bird of prey is, you know, reducing its prey into bite-sized pieces. But it was also closely tied to wetlands. So think about the shore of Lake Erie. Think about the natural estuaries that you have, like Arcola Creek, or this is Old Woman's Creek. Think of any place where you have pristine wetlands. And I showed this picture up here, because this is a picture that was taken at a place called Winus Point. It's on the far west end of Sandusky Bay in Lake Erie. So if you've ever went to Cedar Point and you were at the top of any one of those rides and you looked due west, you wouldn't be able to see it, but where the bay comes down to the Sandusky River, that's where Winus Point is. There was a time when Winus Point had a great blue heron rookery. Okay, you guys have a rookery park here with great blue herons in Geauga County. That rookery at one time had 1,200 nests. Wow. Now if we think there's a mom and a dad and one or two youngsters per nest, you're talking about a thriving heron metropolis in excess of 4,000 birds. And that was tribute and testimony to the incredible productivity of our Lake Erie, and particularly Sandusky Bay. All of the fish and the frogs and the tadpoles and all of the other things that you could concentrate so many birds in one place and have them be successful there. So this was the world of bald eagles. If you talk about some of our pioneering naturalists here in Ohio, Jared Potter Kirtland, this guy, who we think of sort of one of the founders of modern natural history in the state of Ohio, he moved here. If you've ever been up to Kirtland, Ohio in Lake County is named for Turhan Kirtland, his father, who actually was an agent with the Connecticut Land Company and was an investor there. He also had land in Poland, Ohio by Youngstown. Kirtland Hills, Ohio says that it's named in honor of the son, though, the famed naturalist and physician, Jared Potter Kirtland. And he had a farm out in what is called Rockport then, we call it Lakewood now. But there, at the mouth of the Rocky River, there was an active bald eagle nest, and he talked about it in his journals from 1845 to 1858. So the bald eagles were all over the place, and they caught the attention of this guy. This guy's one of my heroes. This is Francis Hobart Herrick. You know, no one ever heard of this guy, but he was a professor of biology at Western Reserve College, now Case Western Reserve University. And he was a real Renaissance man in the natural sciences. He wrote the first monograph about the natural history of the American lobster when he was a graduate student at Johns Hopkins. He wrote on lots of other freshwater organisms. He was John James Audubon's first biographer after his granddaughter. And then he also was fascinated with the life history of birds. Like, you know, what happens in the nest of a bird? Like, we have that same fascination. If you have a pair of robins that are nesting in a shrub in your backyard, and you're captivated by watching them as they carefully build the nest using grapevine and using mud and other things, and they've got a wonderful nest full, and there's that blessed day when the female lays her first egg, and then another egg, and perhaps a clutch of 4 or 5 eggs, and then they dutifully incubate those eggs, sometimes under very harsh conditions, with the female keeping those eggs warm, maybe 99 degrees, 100 degrees, no matter what the outside temperature is, until finally those eggs hatch, and then you see the tiny little babies, and they raise them. We're all fascinated with that. Well, he wanted to figure out how you could capture that on film in the early part of the 1900s, when cameras were like this big. And he was coming back from a visit to New England. He was on a train going through northwestern Pennsylvania, and he saw this giant nest on a lone tree in a field, a bald eagle nest. And he thought to himself, what would it be to be able to get up on the same level and get pictures of the bald eagles in their nest? So he basically invented what we would now call blind photography. That is, creating a blind or a hide where you're getting in there with your camera so you can take pictures and gain the confidence. The idea is that, day after day, since the birds are seeing the blind, they forget about it. It's part of the woodwork. And they don't really care what's happening inside the blind, so you can capture images of what's going on there. So he did that. This was his first blind right there. This is by the great nest I'm about to show you. And then he added a second level to it. And there's his Army issue tent up there, canvas tent. And this is the nest he photographed. This is the great nest of Vermilion, Ohio. This nest, according to reports, was first started in 1890. And they built a layer here. Now what eagles oftentimes do is the following spring they like to come back to the same nest and they add another layer. So it's this big, this big, and this big, and this big, and this big. Over the next, let's see, 1890 to 1925. That nest grew in proportion until ultimately it was 12 feet tall, 8 feet across the top, and weighed 2½ tons, and was a tribute to the shellbark hickory it was able to actually support that nest for as long as it did, because finally the whole thing came crashing down. It's interesting to point out that even though historically eagles were oftentimes associated with wild, pristine wilderness areas, what do you see behind here? Fields. These are farms near Lake Erie shoreline, but they're in the background. They're on fence rows of farms. The Ohio birds showed an incredible tolerance for human activity, and that was going to be key, ultimately, to their survival. I had a guy by the name of Charles Shipman, who is if you've ever heard of the Burroughs Nature Club that meets up in Willoughby, Ohio, Charles Shipman was its president for, I think, the better part of 25 years. And if you ever knew the Pallisters, human Greta Pallister, Charles Shipman was Greta Pallister's father, and he was a retired chemist. And he got drafted by Dr. Herrick to actually be the guy up in the blind. And he took pictures like this. Now, I'll try to get over here and get out of your way. Now you might notice that that's a color picture. That's a color picture from 1925. You might say, wait a minute, they didn't have color photography back then. What they would do with these pictures is they would take their black and white photo, they would apply it or develop it on a glass slide, a lantern slide, and then using Japanese watercolors. I don't know why, it was always these Japanese watercolors, they would hand paint the images and give them the color that you see here. Now that great nest fell down, so it was followed by this nest, and look at the tower they built, or what they call the Eagle Observatory. This amazing structure in scaffold and steel so they could get up to that level and take pictures like this. I mean, here is an adult bald eagle. I don't know how well you can see it, but that is the head of about a 2-week-old baby. This is being done in the 1920s. Unbelievable perseverance and just a great thing. Herrick wrote a book called The American Eagle. It is actually the pioneering monograph about the American bald eagle. Both its natural history and also its symbolism and heraldry and how important it is to so many folks around here, to Native American organizations, to the United States of America is our symbol. So fabulous pictures. Here's another one from the more modern nest. Here's the adult coming in and 2 youngsters that are in the nest bowl. Just fabulous stuff, and these were some of the hazards they had to encounter to get out to their nest observatory. So fascinating stuff, and I tell you that because Ohio was very much eagle country, particularly the Lake Erie shoreline, the marshes of western Lake Erie, and then a lot of the big rivers or big marshes. This would be naturally attractive to bald eagles, and bald eagles were found throughout this region. But something happened. The first thing that happened to them is persecution. I told you that it wasn't until 1940 that the bald eagle actually got total federal protection. Congress passed the Bald Eagle Act, which made it illegal to kill or possess bald eagles. Well, I have bald eagles at the museum, but I don't own them, you do. They belong to the United States of America. We have a permit from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, the Ohio Division of Wildlife. We hold them, we use them in education, we exhibit them, but they're not anybody's property other than that. And you know what I do with the feathers? Because once a year those birds are going to molt their feathers and grow a new set.